afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Here on Across the Fence, we aim to tell stories about the people and places of Vermont. And once in a while, we bring you a story that's a little off the beaten path, or in this case, hiding in plain sight. The Vermont Statehouse was built in 1859 after its predecessor was almost destroyed by fire. The dome and roof were originally painted red. This painting by James Gilman from 1889 shows Montpelier with the Statehouse rising over the Winooski River. The red roof and dome make it look like it would be better suited to the rolling hills of Tuscany than the Green Mountains of Vermont. It wasn't until the early 20th century when the dome's red paint was replaced by the distinctive gold leaf we see today. If you've visited the Statehouse, you've seen the dome, but have you ever been inside? Here's Across the Fence photographer Keith Silva and Vermont historian Howard Coffin for a tour under the dome of the Vermont Statehouse.
The Statehouse is Vermont's monument to itself. And lucky me, seventh generation Vermonter, most every morning when I drive from my hillside home down to the capital city, I get to see it. Coming down Berlin Street, come around this slight left-hand corner, and there it is on top of one of the world's most beautiful buildings. When the Statehouse comes in view, I'm often reminded of the letters that homesick Vermont soldiers wrote home early in the Civil War. They'd talk about missing the state, wishing they could see old Mansfield, old Camel's Hump, and the old Statehouse. But the Statehouse was brand new. It was built and opened just 2 years before the Civil War, but the word old was used as a term of endearment. They loved this place. 135 feet from base of building to the top of the Goddess of Agriculture series way up there. From where we are down here on the lawn, 235 feet. That building would just about fill up Quechee Gorge. Coming in the great front door of the Statehouse, you come to this spot directly underneath the Great Dome, and you look up. Where's the rotunda? You can't see up into the dome. Walk into almost any dome building, and way up there are clouds, gods looking down, the founding fathers, but here, just ceiling. What's going on? We're now on the second floor of the Statehouse, and we can't find a rotunda up here. But we have found Statehouse curator David Sheets. David, what's with the dome?
Well, Howard, as I think you know, this Statehouse is unique in world architecture because we believe that it is the only building in the world that has a dome on top that is not expressed in any manner whatsoever on the inside. Now, the architect of this building didn't want to waste space with a rotunda, so he came up with a more subtle expression of just putting skylights over the two flanking staircases that lead from the lobby up here. And he did fashion openings that are on either side of the second floor lobby.
Those little balconies.
Those little balconies. And those were specifically punched through the walls so that light from the dome could at least be appreciated here, and you would have the feeling that the building was open to the sky. The problem is the dome itself is actually centered over that threshold to the Representatives Hall in the center of the building. So that was it. That was the only expression. But when a second architect finished the building, they had to eliminate the skylights in a change of plans for trusses that support the weight of the dome on top, and thus no skylights were ever built. No light from above has ever penetrated this building. Perhaps no heavenly inspiration has ever entered the minds of public servants working here at the Statehouse.
I read somewhere that that dome up there weighs 100,000 pounds, but from in here it's hiding. And to find it, we've got to start climbing, and it's quite a climb.
So Howard, you know that the crow's nest is off limits to the public from this point on.
I certainly do. This part of the climb is very familiar to me because when I first came here to work at the State House in 1966, our offices were behind that door.
So Howard, the crow's nest is not quite the same as it was 50 years ago when you occupied it. Today it's the site of all this machinery that basically runs the HVAC systems in the State House.
This was where the press worked in the State House. I worked for the Vermont Press Bureau, Times Argus and Rutland Herald. We had our desks here, as did Associated Press, United Press International, WCA, XTV, WDEV Radio. It was the hub of truth at the State House. But we have to keep on going, and another door must be open to continue our ascent.
Indeed, this is the entrance to the dome.
So we're coming up above the crow's nest, and here we see these massive beams of Vermont wood, the trusses that support the great weight of the dome. What's this all about, David?
These are the very trusses that are the reason why our dome is not expressed on the inside, because these are very massive traditional trusses that the second architect of the State House decided should be used rather than the innovative trusses of Thomas Silloway, the original architect. And it's because of that disagreement that the accident happened, that the skylights were never executed, because these trusses took up all the room. So it's also our attic. Basically, this is the place where many artifacts during the restoration of the State House were found. Historic carpets, drapery cornices, all kinds of great stuff was found up here that informed our effort to turn back the clock in restoring the State House.
Well, this has a wonderful look of age, and now we go up to the best part, the
dome.
final ascent to the dome.
Right up here.
So up we come into the drum of the dome, and when you get here, you find out that this place really is a lot bigger than it looks from way down on the sidewalk 200 plus feet below. I really get the feeling in this large space of being in something that is really old, and this is 150 plus years old.
First of all, you're struck probably by the fact the dome is all wood. This is a wooden structure on a granite State House. And like a lot of the faux finishes that are found throughout the building, this too had a faux finish on the outside. They painted the drum. This portion of the dome that we're standing in with the windows is what we call the drum of the dome. And the exterior has beautiful ionic column pilasters. It has attenuated windows that give you a monumental sense of the dome. Most important of all, it was finished off with a stucco-like paint that they created by throwing sand into the paint. The idea was this gray drum might look like the rest of the State House and look as though it too was made of granite, but obviously it is not. On the inside, this raw barn-like structure is what we have instead, and it looks like a round barn, in fact, that has been plunked down on top of the State House. Not a bad structure to have in a state like Vermont, where round barns were famous for them. To have a round barn on top of the State House is maybe the virtue of this structure.
And of course, the minute you come into this space, what catches your eye is there's graffiti everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And some of the names are familiar to me. I think many of them are pages who served during the legislative session.
There's actually graffiti up here that dates all the way back to the construction of the State House, which would be routine. In other words, the people who you know, devoted their lives to building this building 150 years ago, naturally wanted to leave their mark on it somewhere. So they were the first people to have graffiti up here. And as you suggest, the pages routinely are brought up here as a rite of passage to leave their mark on the building. And I think we could make room for one of Vermont's more noted historians to join the ranks.
Shall we see if we can find a space?
Absolutely.
David, as you of course know, the Statehouse dome was red when the Statehouse opened in 1859, and I think it remained so until 1906, when it was gilded and became gold. And I think the last time that was done was 1976. Now, there's a favorite Robert Frost poem of mine titled, "Nothing Gold Can Stay." Is it true that perhaps things are fading a bit?
Yes. It's 40 years, so you say 1976 was the last time gold leaf was applied to the dome. It was regilded on an average of about every 20 years after 1906, and then all of a sudden we've gone through a period of double that length, 40 years since it was last regilded. And we're only in the last 5 years, I'd say, have we now been able to see the effect from down here. And that is that the gold leaf is wearing off and that it needs to be regilded again. So we're coming up on a period when we hope to work on the dome in general, structural problems within, including the staircase that takes you all the way to the tip top that has some structural issues, and to make it weather tight again. It has the oldest copper roof that we know of in this state. The original copper is still up there, no longer covered with the red paint, but now covered with gold leaf. This is a representation of the amount of solid gold that gets hammered very, very thin to become gold leaf. About 70 to 80% of the original gold leaf from 1976 is still up there. We've lost 20% of the gold, which of course scrapes off every time ice and snow build up on the dome and then begin to retreat.
So this little bit of gold,
that little bit
will
of
do
gold.
all that. That's
exactly.
That's amazing. Now
Yeah.
I remember being here as a reporter in the 70s and watching them work on gilding that dome, and it sort of looked rather scary. It's a long ways up there, as we now know.
Exactly.
When do you hope to get this started?
This coming year, we are going to be presenting, working on the dome to the legislature when they take their seats in 2017. We'll hopefully have the conversation, shouldn't we plan to do this in the next couple years? And that's something that we hope to generate that conversation with the help of advocates like the Friends of the Vermont Statehouse, our private nonprofit support group, and others who know that the Statehouse is a very important museum in the state of Vermont, and a tourist attraction, in addition to its life as the home of the legislature and the seat of state government.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Howard and David. And that's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.